So anytime you talk about the family, anytime you bring up the idea of family, for some people, that brings up hurts. That brings up wounds. That brings up negative thoughts about the family. And what we have to be careful of is applying those familial perceptions that we have to what happened in Scripture. Because I think sometimes we think, well, that's the way my family worked. You know, when we talk about, one of the things we're going to talk about is Jesus being left at the temple. And in today's society, we would think, well, man, that's neglect. You left your kid for 3 days and it took you 3 days to figure out that he was gone. You know, we would perceive that as neglect. And we'll talk about why, you know, what was going on there. But you have to be careful of applying our cultural standards, our understanding of society to a culture that was 2,000 years ago. It is a little bit different. So I do ask that you do that. But first off, let's review a little bit before we dig in. So week 1, of course, we just did an introduction. Then week 2, we talked about callings. We talked about how do you call people to something. This was dealing with the disciples and the mentoring relationships. So how do you call? And we talked about that when you call someone into that deeper mentoring relationship, you follow Jesus' example, which was to call them to a higher purpose. Call them to something that's meaningful. And we talked about that Jesus said, simply put, follow me. And just to kind of rehash, I always kind of interpreted that as Jesus kind of walked up and is like, follow me. And then just walked off. And just because that would be like, well, okay, and then just go. And with Peter, he said, follow me and I will make you a fisher of men. You know, gave him that challenge that really drove home. So how do you call people? And then we talked about, well, what happens when the person you're mentoring says something that's incorrect or inaccurate, and how Jesus took the direct approach. That he was very direct with Peter when Peter said something stupid. He would say, no, get behind me. This is not what's happening right now. That he took a very direct approach instead of shoving it under the rug or pushing it aside. We also talked about, well, what happens if your mentor betrays you? And we compared Peter and Judas together. And the difference, the loving way that Jesus reinstated Peter at the end of John, and how he took Peter and said, shepherd my sheep, and reinstated him back into the fold because of Peter's repentance. Then we talked about religious leaders and what happens if a religious leader tries to make you look bad, and that was the Pharisees and the tax collectors. So what happens if someone is all full of themselves and prideful and thinking that they can just tear you down? How to react to that? And remember, it was don't react in anger. Take a breath. It's okay to say, I don't know. You know, those kind of things that we discussed. Then we looked at what happens when a leader gets it right. And we talked about Nicodemus. So with Nicodemus, that he came to Jesus at night and talked to Jesus at night. And then later on was there when Jesus died, and he brought 100 pounds of embalming herbs. So there was a change in Nicodemus's heart because Jesus was willing to hear him, was willing to have a conversation and do it in a loving way that was appropriate for that person, and basically lead them into restoration. So tonight we're going to look at families. And families, this is the ones that can hurt us the most. Now, why is it that family is the one that can hurt us the most? out of everybody. I mean, you think about your friends, you think about your coworkers, you think about your bosses. Why is it that when something happens to you from a family member, it hurts you so deeply?
Because they're supposed to love you the most.
Oh, okay. They're supposed to love you the most? All right. Anybody else? What do you think?
Sometimes you spend most of your life with them.
Okay.
They're right there with you in the home.
Okay.
Usually have the strongest relationship with those people.
Okay. Strongest relationship. Okay.
They're supposed to be with you no matter what, supposed to be safe.
Okay. A safe person. Have your back no matter what. Kind of your brother and sister in arms together. So that is something. And look at what Jesus said. Somebody read Mark 6:4. Somebody flip over to Mark 6:4. Okay. So why did Jesus say a prophet is not without honor except where? Where was a prophet without honor? In his hometown. Why? Why do you think with his family, his hometown, and those people who knew him, a prophet struggles the most? Dave Ramsey has a really good term for this. There you go. That's it. The powdered butt syndrome. Because these are the people who changed your diapers when you were a kid and wiped up your doo-doo. And now you're coming around and trying to tell these people about Jesus, telling them about a path to God, a relationship with the Lord, and you're trying to teach them after they powdered your booty. And that's hard. That is really, really hard to think that, and you know, I'll be honest with you guys, now that my kids are grown, you still see your kids as like this, right? When they talk to you and they start telling you adult things, you're like 10. What are you doing? Investing for your future? What? You have investments? Don't you still have a paper route or something? But that's that powdered butt syndrome. And that's also why it hurts us so much, because we know that we're adults. Everybody else treats us with a level of respect. I remember one time Melissa, because I'm an only child, so I've never experienced this. When the kids were growing up, I'd have to ask Melissa multiple times, is that normal for brothers and sisters to do? Is that okay? And she's like, yes, it's fine. Okay. So we were in our 30s. Yeah, I think we're in our 30s. And we were at our house in Houston, Missouri. Her brothers were there, and Melissa was getting something out of the closet. And granted, her older brother is three years older than she, 2.5, 3 years. And while she's reaching up in the closet, he walks by, pushes her in the closet, shuts the door, and just keeps walking. And, you know, she's like, seriously, does that not ever get old? And he's like, no. Because in his mind, we're still kids. And that's the problem. And that's part of the reason that it hurts so much, is because that relationship, while you continue to grow, that relationship continues to deepen. But at the same time, it's still father-son, father-daughter, sister-brother. You still have that same picture of each other. Your mental image of each other does not change. I mean, just like in marriage, it's the same exact thing. When I look at Melissa, I still see her as being in her mid-20s when we first got married. That's the way I still see her. I don't see her as 50. I don't see myself as 50 either. So not here. When I try to do something else, then I feel, okay, yeah, I'm 50. But that's the way, because while we have grown older, my mental picture of her has not changed. Our relationship has just grown deeper. And again, that's what causes that hurt, is that your mental picture of that person and who that person should be, while it grows deeper, you still have that, they're still my kid. They're still my mom. They're still my dad. And there is something called a father wound. So this is something I first heard about. We were doing a men's Bible study, like I won't even say how long ago because I don't remember. It's at least a 2-digit number in the dates. I would say probably 12 years, 13 years ago. But if you Google it, you'll see all kinds of articles about it. There's stuff on Focus on the Family about it. A lot of preachers have written about it as well. But if you look in your on your handout, I did include this father wound as far as the definition. This is from Focus on the Family. This is their definition. Again, you'll find several, but I thought this one was really good. It's the effect of a father wound is low self-esteem, a deep emotional pain inside, and a performance orientation that makes us doers rather than beings. Because your dad, that is the person that is supposed to be the rock in your family. No matter what social, political leanings, bendings, whatever, you cannot deny the way that God created the family. And God created the family as the dad being the center of the emotional, spiritual stability of that family. And when the dad, and it doesn't have to be abusive. It could be just an absent. So it could be just someone who's absent. Didn't show up for your baseball games. Didn't show up for your softball games. And that causes that wound. And notice that some of the effects of it. That the effect is low self-esteem, deep emotional pain, performance orientation that makes us doers rather than beings. So this would be someone who would seek approval through doing actions rather than changing their heart, rather than flowing from their love of Christ. This would be someone who typically has lower self-esteem and sees themselves as lower because they never had that dad there that was building them up. I see this a lot in my kids at school. A lot of my students, they will struggle. I had one girl tell me just Wednesday, we were talking and she's like, everybody hates me. I'm like, nobody hates you. Yes, everybody hates me. And her friend's like, yeah, everybody hates you, Nora. I'm like, I had to backhand her. I'm like, no. So then as this girl was leaving, I just kind of let it go. But as she was leaving, I said, Nora, she said, what? I go, you are awesome. You are fabulous. Everybody loves you. And I mean, she just went, just beamed happiness as she walked out. That's the power of a dad. And I'm not her dad. But just the power of, and I see that with my boys too in my classes, the power of a male just pouring into a kid, you just see the difference that makes. And when that's absent, that creates a wound. And that creates an issue. And what happens, and the reason I'm talking about this, is what happens then when we read stories like Jesus being left at the temple. Sometimes we take that hurt from our fathers and we read that in and we're like, Joseph, how could you do that? We see that as abusive. We see that as a bad thing that they left him. Or when we read about Jesus saying, well, who are my mother and my father and my brothers and sisters? Anyone who does my will, does the will of the Father. They are my brothers and mothers and sisters. We read that wrongly because we read it through the context of hurt and not through the context of truth. So that's what we have to be careful of, and that's why I wanted to address this first. So, if you're looking at, maybe you're looking at your life, I mean, I have a father wound. My dad very much. When I turned, I think when I started to go to church was when he started to back off a lot. Before I went to church, what we would do is we would go shooting a lot, we would go fishing a lot, we would do a lot of things. And then I started to go to church, and we stopped doing all those things. And then when I turned 16, No, 15. I was 15. And I had just almost failed 8th grade. Yes, I was banned from telling you if I haven't told you this yet. So, so I was banned. I almost failed. I really close to failing 8th grade. I was failing 9th grade. And my dad just said, well, you're a man, do whatever you want. And that was pretty much the last time he ever gave me advice as well. So, you could imagine what that would do to a young man who's in his teens trying to figure out life. Now, fortunately, I had the church, and I had my youth pastor, Doug. I had my associate pastor, Larry. I had a bunch of men in my life, and Gary, who I worked for several summers. I had these other men who were able to come alongside me and help me out. But that wound was still something that was there, and I've had to deal with. So dealing with it, how would you deal with something like that? What do you think? I mean, I have answers. I just want to know what you think. I've been talking for a while. What do you think? How would you deal with something like that? Because that's pretty heavy stuff. I'll tell you, for me, the very first thing I had to do was I had to go back, and every instance that came to mind of my dad failing me, I had to forgive him. I had to go back and say, that moment when my dad said, you're a man and you're on your own, I had to go back and I had to forgive him for that. I had to go back and forgive him for not taking me fishing ever again when I was about 12 or 13. Until I think the next time he took me fishing, I was in my mid-20s, was the next time he took me. And that's because I asked. And then after that, I would invite him to come down and do things with me, come down to Houston. But I had to forgive him for all those instances. I had to go back and specifically forgive him. And it was a instant by instant by instant thing. It wasn't oh, Dad, I forgive you, and move on. It was that instant by instant thing. Because what I needed to do was, as what Hebrews 13 talks about, I had to remove that root of bitterness that was in my heart towards my dad, that was causing that emotional separation, that was causing that loneliness, that was causing that worry. I had to remove that. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is, I had to be the one to try to reestablish that relationship because he wasn't. So I had to be the one to call. I had to be the one and say, hey, Dad, let's go ride the Katy Trail. Called him one summer. We went and rode 60 miles. And after my dad died, my mom told me he talked about that for years. It was like 2 days. We rode 60 total miles, 31 miles one day, 30 miles the next day. My bike broke the second day, and we had to ride 10 miles back with one pedal. My leg was like that big when I was done. But I had to go but it was that adventure. We went canoeing. I invited him to go down and go canoeing, and we spent a day on the Current River down in southern Missouri. But those only happened because I took initiative, and I had to say, if anything is going to happen, I have to do it. So the forgiveness was for me. That forgiveness is not for him. Forgiveness is never for the other person. It's for me. It was so that my heart could be healed. And then after that, then the restoration, I chose to do that. That wasn't necessary, but it was something that I chose to do. So are there any questions on the father wound? It's a deep topic. I think next year I'm going to teach my forgiveness course again, and we'll do an entire day on that. But are there any questions on that? Yeah, and that's what you got to look at is, it's again, forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiving someone has nothing to do whatsoever with the other person. Forgiving someone always has to do with your heart, healing your heart, so that you can love the other person. That's always the issue. Okay, any other questions? All right, then let's get into the meat and potatoes then. Now that we've gotten there, so now that we've talked a little bit, and again, if you want to talk more about that father wound afterwards, let me know. Just ask, and again, I'll be more than happy to share more about it and help you out with that. But looking at Jesus at the temple. So this is Luke 2. So this is Luke 2, 41 through 52. And so I just want to real quick, I'm going to read this real quick. And then what I want you guys to do is in your groups, you're going to discuss this question. So Luke 2, 41 through 52. Now, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when Jesus became 12, they went up there according to the custom of the feast. And as they were returning, after spending, as they were returning after spending the full number of days, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents were unaware. But supposed him to be in the caravan and went a day's journey, and they began looking for him among the relatives. They did not find him, and they returned to Jerusalem. Then, after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when they saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us this way? Behold, your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." And Jesus said, "Why is it that you have been looking for me? Did you not know that I had to be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand the statement which he had made to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth, and he continued in subjection to them. And his mother treasured these things in her heart. And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor of God and men. So the question is, how would you want your children, or if you're a child, your parents, to respond if this was you in this situation? So if you were Jesus, how would you respond? Or if you were Jesus' parents, how would you want Jesus to respond? So how would you want this conversation to happen? How would you have done it if something like this happened? So what I'm trying to get you is to put yourself in the parents' shoes or in Jesus' shoes. What would be your response if this happened? So think about how this would play out in today's environment. Okay, so how would you guys have responded if you were in this situation? So what would be your response? Would you have responded the same way as Mary and Joseph? Or would you have responded a little bit different? Okay. Yep, 1, 2, 2.
Last stop we made, where'd it go?
Where's 3? Where's all my little ducklings?
As a school bus driver, ex-school bus drivers, we both would be,
Oh, yeah. Head counts.
oh yeah, they always gotta know.
All right. Anyone else? What would be your response? Okay. Like, where were you? What was your exciting adventure today?
What provoked you to run away? And being like, why did you do this?
Yeah.
Like, because they almost, just the way it reads, they almost kind of make it about themselves more than about, like, oh my gosh, we found you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how could you do this to us?
Yeah.
Instead of, like, that excitement of, like, wow, we finally found you. We've been looking for you for 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Was it a common thing in this culture for kids to just disappear in the temple for 3 days?
Well, we'll talk about in a second how that happened. Yeah, so there is a little nuance that's not talked about in the text that is a cultural thing that the way they traveled that would make it possible. Did you guys come up with anything? Been upset? Yeah, see, being 12, we would have to have a good talk, and depending on how the talk went, may have to have some other forms of convincing to go along with it. Did you guys come up with anything?
I just kind of feel like she knew he's who he is from before birth.
Yeah.
It's like, how did it, it just goes to show how parents care about their kids. Because even though she knew exactly who he was, she still felt, oh my goodness, my son's missing.
Yes.
He's God.
Yes,
You
yes.
know?
Well, and there is a little key in the passage that I think tripped Mary's memory and Joseph's memory as to why they didn't do something different when they found him? Because, all of us, I think, would have disciplined the child. And definitely back then, if they thought he was a rebellious child, what was the law according to a rebellious child? What were you supposed to do to a rebellious child? Do what? Yeah, use the rod. And if they continue to be rebellious, then you stoned them. So because, and the reasoning behind it is, if you cannot submit to your parents, how will you ever submit to God? So if you can't submit to your parents, then maybe we'll just give you over to God and let him deal with you because you're in total rebellion. So there was that issue as well. But look at 49. And in verse 49, when Jesus responds, it says, "Why is it that you are looking for me? Did you not know that I had to be in my Father's house?" One of the only places that my Father is used all by itself in the Bible. And when a Jew would say it, or a Hebrew would say it, they would say, "My Father in heaven." They would say, our Father in heaven. But they would not say just, "My Father." So the fact that he said, "Did you not know that I would be in my Father's house," without the "our Father" or "in heaven" or anything like that, that it was my Father. That should have been enough for Mary and Joseph to step back and go, "Oh yeah, this is our son, but this is the Messiah. And he is with his real dad, if you will." He was fine. He was not in rebellion. He was not being rebellious. He was talking with and spending time with his dad. Now, to the question as to how they could have left. So, culturally speaking, and again, this is another thing where we have to be careful because when we travel together as a family, even a big caravan, because this would have been a big family caravan, how do we usually travel as families when we're going from one place to another? In the same car. I mean, I like to have me in the front seat driving because everyone else scares me. Then Melissa's next to me. Then the kids are in the back, right? Kind of typical. And then after a while, you might change because maybe Melissa wants to go take a nap. So she goes in the back and one of the kids come up front. And we're all together in a unit. And we tend to take that method of travel and apply it back to antiquity and say, well, they would have all been together, traveling together. Why? How could you miss a kid for a day and not realize the kid was there? Even if you were in a big group, wouldn't the family all be together? And even if the kid, if you left Jerusalem and you thought, oh, well, he's up there with Cousin Baba. Cousin Bob will take care of him. And then night would come, or later in the afternoon, you realize, oh, wait a minute, Jesus didn't show up for lunch. And maybe you start looking for him pretty soon. But a whole day? And the reason is that when they traveled, they would usually send all the women and the young children first. So all the women and the young children would go first because they would be the slower, and then the men and the older children would come next. Typically, the division between a young child and an old child was 12 to 13. How old was Jesus? 12. So Joseph might have assumed, oh, Jesus being 12, he's up with the younger children with Mary. And Mary might have assumed, oh, Joseph's trying to train Jesus to be a man. We took him to the temple. He got to go see the temple at 12 because at 13, that's when they would be full covenant members of the Sanhedrin, according to the commandments. So at 13, and they would usually go at 11 or 12 for a visit to see how the Sanhedrin worked. So that was part of what probably happened here was they took Jesus up to visit the Sanhedrin. So then Mary would have thought, well, maybe Joseph has him in the back and he's teaching him about being a man. So they would travel an entire day because they weren't together. One thinking the other one had him. And I don't know, parents, have you ever thought that? I thought you had the kid. Well, you had the kid. Where's the kid? We do that because there's two of us. So that's how they would have made it an entire day. So it wasn't abuse. It wasn't neglect. It was he had hit just that right age that they thought the other one had it. Now, how big do you think Jerusalem was at the time? The center of the Jewish nation. Don't Google. Okay. So you type in, no Google. Okay, 100,000. Do I hear 200,000? Okay, over 1 million people in Jerusalem.
Maybe not in the actual city.
Okay. No, just normal, because this was right at the end and everybody had left. So everyone was on their way out and leaving. So the typical population of Jerusalem. Because really, Jerusalem was not a large city like what we would think of today. And again, we got to kind of be careful applying modern to past. They estimate it's probably 60,000 people in residence in Jerusalem. About 400 to 420 acres in size was probably about how big that area was with houses and everything. So not very big. Now, the fact that it took them 3 days to find Jesus, that's a whole nother story. When if they would have remembered that Jesus is the Son of God, maybe the first place you would go is the temple. But, think about it. Jesus came from what town? Where was Jesus at? Nazareth, a smaller town. Nazareth was not a big whopping metropolis. So what kind of teachers would Jesus have been exposed to in Nazareth? Do what? Layman. I mean, there might have been one really good priest there that would be a good teacher, but for the most part, it's probably not your big top-tier priests. But in Jerusalem, what kind of people is he going to be exposed to there? That's going to be the top tier. So that's why he was in the temple. He was questioning the top-tier priests. And they were questioning him, and what did people say about when they talked about Jesus and that experience in the temple? Yeah, they were astonished at his answers and his wisdom. So he was face to face with the top teachers of the time. And they were astonished at his wisdom as a 12-year-old boy. It just goes to show the miraculous nature of Jesus being God. There was no doubt. This is not just some 12-year-old punk boy. This is the Son of God. Now, application though. So what do we do now with this? Because remember, our whole point is this idea of the ministry of reconciliation. So the ministry of reconciliation. How did Jesus talk to his parents? Respectfully, clearly, okay, direct. Was he rebellious? Do you think he gave the, what I get every day? That's like my biggest pet peeve when a kid goes, I'm like, yeah. Oh no, bruh, that doesn't bother me. They say bruh to me and I just say it right back to them. I'm like, bruh. Oh, I do it in several accents. They go, yo, bruh, man, what's up? That's what I usually give them back. And then they go, oh, stop. I'm like, okay, that's how bad it sounds when you say it. So, but notice it was very respectful. Somebody read Ephesians 6, 2 through 3. So Ephesians 6, 2 through 3. Okay. Honor your father and mother, because this one has a promise that you will live long and it will be well with you. Because remember what we talked about, if a child is being rebellious, you stone them. So if you honor your parents, you will live long. And that even goes into old age. That's not something that we stay with at that one little part. So somebody go to Matthew 15 and read 1 through 6. So Matthew 15 and read 1 through 6. So culturally speaking, what can we say to our parents if we think our parents are not doing what's right to us? Now, we're not going to go down the road of they're physically, sexually, emotionally abusive, okay? That's a whole nother category. But we just think they're being a little mean to us, a little grumpy. That they, maybe they talk too much about politics. Every time we come around, it's politics, politics, politics. Or they're always trying to tell me what to do. Every time I come around, they're telling me what to do. I'm a 51-year-old man. My parents should not be telling me what to do. What is the culturally appropriate response to that? Do what? Okay. But culturally speaking, what can... Yeah, there you go. Oh, shut up, Mom. What is it they'd say? Shut up, boomer. That's the cultural thing to say. What does Jesus say? How did Jesus treat his parents whenever they found him at the temple? And what does Jesus say in this passage we should do when our parents confront us like this? What should be our response according to Jesus' model? Speak the truth, and speak the truth with respect. First and foremost, you respect. No matter what. Even if they're crazy, kooky, off the rockers, talking about who knows what, telling you to do weird, you respect. And respect stems out of love, which is why we started with the father wound, because you've got to forgive your parents the things that they have done in the past so that you can love your parents in their craziness today. Everybody's parents are crazy. Oh, we're crazy. Don't say no. You know very well we're crazy. So all of us are crazy in some aspect. But the job of the child is to love and respect their parents and listen to their parents. That is the job, no matter how old you are. That's what Jesus was saying. You have said culturally it's okay to dismiss your parents, but I tell you that is not the case. You are to love and respect your parents because that is a command with a promise that you will live a long time. So the kids should respond with respect and admit they're wrong. And depending on the age of the child, like if it was the two of us and you do something wrong and I do something wrong, well then hopefully you would be able, when we're both calm, to confront me about it because we're older. You're an adult man, I'm an adult man. We should be able to have a conversation. But if it's something like one of them young punks over there, that in their situation, if they were to possibly confront, that could be disrespect, depending on how they do it. The best situation is you, the child, repent. And then later on, when emotions are calm, then you talk. No, it is not the child's responsibility. The child's responsibility is to forgive and obey. If the opportunity comes up, then yes, they can, but it's not their responsibility. So that would not fall on the child, per se.
The same as we would say, it's not a husband's responsibility to make his wife submit. Mm-hmm. It's not a wife's responsibility to make a husband love her and understand her. They stay in their lane and let God take care of the other.
Right. So yeah. So it is never the child's responsibility to discipline the parents. That's why I say that's why the whole thing on this has been that love and respect aspect. That you forgive your parents, you love your parents, you respect your parents. But you're not going to necessarily be able to convince your parents that they need to change and do something. You can have conversations with them. You can tell them, hey, Dad, this behavior is really not healthy for you. But in the end, you're still a kid, and they're still the parent. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You could bring it to their pastor. Bring it to somebody you know that's a trusted friend, and maybe have them have that hard conversation. I'm concerned about Dad. But in the end, that's why Jesus said a prophet has no honor among his family. Because, as Daryl said, you're lanes. It's your lanes of authority. And you have that powdered butt syndrome. Yes. Now, if they're being flagrantly sinful, if your parents go out and murder someone, tell the authorities. It's that if they're going to harm themselves, then you step in. So again, we're not taking the extreme.
Even in the
All right. Then our next one. So Jesus' family coming to get him. This is Matthew 12. So Matthew 12, 46 through 50. And then Mark 3, 20 to 35. How about you guys? I'll give you, let's say, 5 minutes or so. Read through these passages at your table, and just what do you notice? What's something that sticks out on these passages? So what are some things that you find interesting about these? All right, what are some things you noticed about this passage? It would suck to be Jesus.
So perfect.
Yeah, Jesus would have been the perfect brother. Why can't you be like Jesus? Because I'm not the Son of God. All right, what else? What else do we notice about this passage?
I see sarcasm.
Sarcasm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it gets to the point, makes the point.
Okay. Got a little
Who's my brother?
Yeah, a little flipping of the context there. All right. It's so obvious everybody missed it. The what? No? Oh. Yes. Did you notice who of his family came? His mother and his brothers. No father. So historically, we think Jesus' dad died well before this. And that is something that, when you read, like in Hebrews, when it talks about Jesus being a high priest who understands us, Jesus lost a parent at a younger age. So he is able to sympathize with us and understand us, not only in our temptation, but he is able to sympathize with us in our pain and our hurt. Because he went through that loss. So again, that's something else to remember, is that he we think, did not have a dad at this point, because he's never mentioned. In fact, if you go to Mark 6:3, so somebody read Mark 6:3. So that's a pretty exhaustive list of Jesus' family that the people are describing. No Joseph. If Joseph were still around and that exhaustive of a list, he would have been included. Because remember, Joseph was a carpenter, was a woodworker. And they would have referenced, is not Joseph the carpenter who built the city gate? Is he not here? And Mary and his brothers, James and Judas and his sisters, aren't they all here? But instead it's Mary, the brothers, and the sisters. So Jesus went through the loss of a father. So that's like the first thing. And that's one I think we just kind of gloss over, because we're like, Mary, mother's there. But we forget his earthly father wasn't there. So that's number one. Now, secondly, and this is kind of a tough one, is the meaning of this section. So some people misinterpret this and say that Jesus was abandoning his family. Did Jesus abandon his family at this point? Was this a severing of the relationship between his mother and brothers and sisters? Okay, but remember that Mary treasured everything in her heart the entire time he was growing up, and she was at his crucifixion. And James became the leader of the church. Is there anything where Jesus actively said that, including the family, and making sure that I'll give you a big hint, his mother was taken care of? So yes, at the crucifixion, if you flip over to John, so go to John chapter 19. So John chapter 19, verse 26. So John chapter 19, verse 26. When Jesus then saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, which, remember, that's John. I lost my place, sorry. He said to his mother, "Mother," or "Woman, behold your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." For that hour, the disciple took her into his home. So if that statement that we're looking at right now, if that was a cleaving of Jesus' family, then why would Jesus do this at the end of his life? It was not. That was not the intention of what transpired in the passages we're looking at. This was not a separation from his family. Instead, what this was a parable. He was using his family as an object lesson. Because how did the Jews derive their righteousness? If you were a Hebrew in the day or a Jewish individual, how would you derive your righteousness? How would you know you're righteous? Lineage. Your family. If you were a son of who? Abraham. So if you were a son of Abraham, then you would be considered righteous. Then you would be considered good. You can go to the temple and all of that, and you can take part in all the rites and the ceremonies and the festivals and all of that if you were a son of Abraham. But what Jesus was saying, so if we look at the passage here, so flip back to Mark. So go back to the one in Mark. So Mark 3:20. So notice he says, "And then he came home, and the crowd gathered around so that they could not even eat a meal. And when his own people," that's his family, "heard this, they went to take him into custody, for they were saying he has lost his senses." So his family came because they thought he was crazy. They thought he was nuts. And they loved him, so they were going to try to take him so that he wouldn't embarrass himself anymore. But at the very end, when Jesus says, "When the crowd sitting around him said to them, 'Behold, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you.' And then Jesus answered them and said, 'Who are my mother and my brothers?' And looking at those sitting around him, he said, 'Behold, my mothers and my brothers, for whoever does the will of God is my mother and my brother.'" He's using this situation as a teaching moment to tell them it is not about your lineage. It is not about your genetics. Your genetics does not determine your entry into the kingdom. What determines your entry into the kingdom is doing the will of God. It is all about your faith. It is all about what's going on internally. That determines it. That's why when you talk to someone and you say, "Hey, are you a Christian?" And they say, "Well, yeah, I've been one since I was a baby." "Well, really? Why?" "Well, I went to church with my parents since I was a kid. And, my parents are really good Christians. My dad's a deacon in the church." And they start listing off all this auxiliary stuff that has to do with their family. And that's exactly what Jesus was talking about. He's saying it's not about any of that. It is about if you do the will of God. So, going back to how did Jesus talk to his family? in this situation? Was he disrespectful? Did he disown his family? No. How many of you ever used your kids as an object lesson to someone else? I mean, I do it all the time. It's kind of the benefit of being a teacher is I get to use my kids as object lesson. That's why you have them. I mean, I don't know if you've figured that out yet. You have kids so that they can do the chores and you have object lessons to teach other people about stupidity. I mean, that's the whole point right there. I mean, that's what Jesus was doing with his family. He wasn't disrespecting his family. He wasn't disowning his family. He was using his family as an object lesson to teach a point. Because later on, his mother was still with him. So if he was being insulting, if he was being disowning, if he was being sarcastic or anything like that, his mother and his brothers would have disowned him. And they would not have continued to follow him. But the fact that James became the leader of the church, the fact that his mother followed him all the way to the crucifixion, and the fact that he lovingly gave authority over his mom to his most beloved disciple to take care of her, Jesus loved his family. He was just doing what we all do. Using the funny stories, using the things in our family to teach a point. Because again, that's what family is about. That's what the family of the church is all about. Is we come together as a family, we share stories, we love each other, we live life together, and we use, it's like a kid mosh pit up there. We use those instances then to help others in their struggles. The reason I like to tell stories about my kids is because I know how they turned out. And I know the stupid choices they made, and I know the end result of those stupid choices. That the end result is they turned out good, at least so far. I mean, they are only in their 20s. But so far, so good. And the same thing's true here. So again, that's why we have to be careful, back to what we started with, we have to be careful reading in our hurts that we have because of family today, our cultural understanding of our culture. We have to be careful reading the hurts and cultural expectations into Scripture. Because you read your hurts and your cultural expectations into Scripture, and you will arrive at wrong conclusions. So again, when you read that, that's why it's important that we take care of our heart. You know, Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart because out of it flows the wellspring of life. You have to guard that. That's the most important thing. And forgiveness is the first step. Making sure that you've taken care of those family issues so that when you read things like this, you can read it well. I know I'm like right on time. Let me just read something real quick because I think this is awesome. So this is a testimony from a Muslim man that. So I found this on a Reddit forum for true Christians because I surf Reddit occasionally. So it says, following Jesus is decisive. So the testimony. Hi, everyone. I wanted to share my testimony. I'm 21 years old from Turkey. I grew up in a Muslim family, but recently I gave my life to Jesus. It's been the most freeing and life-changing decision of my life. Today, I told my mom about my faith because I was always lying to my parents when they questioned me if I was a Christian or not. And today, I made it official because I was sick of lying. My mom broke down crying and told me that when I finished university, I should leave the house and that they will cut all ties with me. She also said she doesn't grant me her blessing in Islam. Hearing that crushed me because I love her and I don't want to lose my family. I think God made me remember that when Jesus warned us in Matthew 10:34 through 35 that following him might divide families, He also said in Matthew 19:29 that those who leave family for his sake will gain 100-fold in eternal life. And Psalm 27:10 comforts me. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. It still hurts, but I know I'm not abandoned. I have a Father in heaven who loves me, and I'm a part of God's family now. So, again, the point is, notice he was not angry at his parents. He loved his parents, even when his parents disowned him. That's that love, respect, forgiveness that Jesus demonstrated at the temple, that Jesus demonstrated when his parents came to get him because they thought he was crazy. And that's the way we should interact with our parents when we think they're crazy, is love and respect. All right, if you have kids, you can go get them. If you have questions, I'll be here.